I feel that, and I'm going to paint the industry with a broad stroke right now. I feel that a lot of advisors are unconscious competence.
Hmm.
They're good at what they do, but when you probe as to why they're successful or why they're achieving what they're achieving in their business, most of them can't clearly articulate what their processes are. And when are able to articulate a process, that ensures that it's easily transferable and repeatable. And that's important because as you look at growing a practice, if you don't have those processes clear and you're bringing other people into the business, it becomes more challenging because everyone starts to approach things from their own perspective. I think that for a lot of advisors, it's really about shifting from being that unconscious competent to really finding what is their true process for different aspects.
This is the Future Ready Advisor, a show about transforming your financial advisory practice. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan, a wealth management consultant, behavioral scientist, and keynote speaker. In this podcast, I dive deep into the real challenges advisors face and bring you insightful conversations with top industry experts. Together, we'll explore practical strategies grounded in behavioral science to help you better serve your clients, optimize your time, and build a future-ready practice. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Sam Sivarajan. Welcome to today's episode of the Future Ready Advisor. Today, I'm joined by Ray Adamson, a longtime coach, practice manage expert, and FinTech executive who has worked across the advisory, carrier, and technology sides of the financial services industry. Ray brings a combination of insight into advisor behavior, tech innovation, and industry structure, all of which are critical to understanding how to build a scalable, human-centered advisory practice. In today's episode, we'll explore how the evolution of advice, emerging tools like AI, and smart succession strategies are reshaping the future of the industry. We'll also talk about how advisors can thrive by shifting from ad hoc habits to structured, scalable processes, and how that shift is essential not just for growth, but for survival. Ray, welcome to the show.
Sam, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this since I saw your main platform presentation at the Scalable conference a couple of months ago. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So thanks very much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining. I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. It's very timely. Now, Ray, you've had an interesting career that spans advisor coaching, carrier strategy, and fintech leadership.
Mhm.
What drew you to each of these roles, and how have they shaped the way you think about the future of advice?
Well, that's a great question, Sam. And I'd love to say I had a grand overarching plan for all of this. But as I look back, there wasn't one specific thing that led me to where I am today. Much of it, I've built my career on relationships.
Hmm.
And, starting out in the business as an advisor, I hired a business coach. That got me into the coaching experience. We built a practice management business, and that led me to working with one of Canada's largest carriers. And what drew me to the roles was the opportunity for leadership to support growth and development, both of the organization and the people in that organization. Also, my own growth and development as well. So that was a big part of what attracted me to those roles for sure.
It's funny as you're talking. It just reminds me that's that would be my answer to my rather varied career, etc. And it reminds me. There's a Danish philosopher, Kierkegaard, that said that
Yep.
life must be lived forwards, but can only be understood backwards. It's only now that I fully understand what he means by that, but
Exactly.
totally understand your point. But we're all the sum of our experiences, right? It's hard to kind of explain what they do, but they do give you a unique lens on the world. And that explains a lot of your success and a lot of the insight that you're able to bring to advisors and advisory practices.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree 100%. Thank you for that. When I look at my experience as an advisor and in the advisory space, and we look forward to kind of where things are going, the future of advice. when you look at the industry, a lot of people are focused on high net worth, which I completely understand and respect. But I also get concerned because there could be a swath of our population that isn't getting access to the advice that they need at the time they need it. And when I look forward, I think technology, I might as well mention it, it's going to come up. I'll talk about AI. I think that that could be a leveler of the playing field to be able to support the industry in providing appropriate advice to everyone at the right time.
No, it's a great point. And let's talk about that for a moment, because it reminds me of what you're saying. And I agree with you 100%. It reminds me of the experience that the UK had when they brought in their new the regulations, and it created a vacuum for the low and call it the mass affluent and the retail space. We're Canadian, so let's use the hockey analogy. It's the high net worth. To your point, I understand why there is an attraction there. I mean, I've myself worked in that space for many years, but it's almost like going to where the puck is as opposed to where the puck is going to be, right?
Right.
And to your point, I mean, other than the fact that there is a huge swath of people that really do need advice and that are probably being underserved, which in and of itself creates opportunity, I also believe that's also the segment of the population that is in most dire need of good quality advice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's a desire to really do good in our industry, and I think you can do well by doing good. But it comes back to your systems and processes, and I know we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But if you're set up to have a more of a mass approach, I worked with advisors years ago that their whole business structure was mass selling.
Right.
At the time, it was through faxes. I'm dating myself, but they were generating a lot of business, and it was a transactional business. And I will support that 100% if it's an actual conscious decision to drive a business like that. So I think when we look at the high net worth strategy, there's a lot of people fishing in a very small pond and competing against each other, while we have this larger pond that virtually nobody's really working in. And I feel it's a miss. And I think it comes back to getting the right systems and processes in place so you can go after that market in an appropriate and profitable way.
100% agree. And technology can play a huge role. And we will come on to this, it is moving from, call it a lifestyle type of practice to a business type of practice, which as you mentioned, it requires having the right processes in place, using digitization, using technology. And on that note, I think it's certainly been my experience, and I suspect yours, that before you can digitize a process, you actually need to have a solid analog process, right?
Exactly.
Why do you think so many advisors struggle with building repeatable processes? And what would your advice be for making that shift from that lifestyle type of practice to a real business?
Well, it's a good question. I feel that, and I'm going to paint the industry with a broad stroke right now. I feel that a lot of advisors are unconscious competence. They're good at what they do, but when you probe as to why they're successful or why they're achieving what they're achieving in their business, most of them can't clearly articulate what their processes are. And when you are able to articulate a process that ensures that it's easily transferable and repeatable. And that's important because as you look at growing a practice, if you don't have those processes clear and you're bringing other people into the business, it becomes more challenging because everyone starts to approach things from their own perspective. I think that for a lot of advisors, it's really about shifting from being that unconscious competent to really finding what is their true process for different aspects of the business. It's not just how do we sell, how do we service, what's our marketing process? And when they have that clearly mapped out, as you said, in the analog format, it now becomes much easier to figure out, how do I want to digitize this? So when they're looking at technology solutions, it's not just, hey, what's everybody else using or what's the new shiny tool that's on the market? Now it's more about, hey, here's what I do. How does that fit into this piece of software? How does that software actually accelerate my business and what I'm trying to accomplish?
Now, I'm going to say something that might be controversial. how much do you believe, in addition to what you've said, that there is a genuine desire from advisors to want to give, we call it a personalized experience, a personalized service. And so there's a bit of a implicit militancy to kind of create processes because there's a view perhaps that stops you from being personalized.
Yeah, I can see where that interpretation could come through for people, but ultimately what you're trying to do is ensure that the people you're working with, your clients, your prospects, centers of influence even, they're getting the appropriate experience that they deserve.
Right.
And when you are all that you're doing when you create a process is ensuring that you're consistent in that experience. So it's not putting up walls around, how you're approaching things and you have to do it this way every single time. But what I've seen in the past in working closely with advisors, when they have a clear process, it ensures that everything gets done on a consistent basis. Because often when they're running hard and out and about meeting with clients and prospects, things will slip through the cracks. So a step here or a step there. So that experience isn't consistent. And I'll tell you, with sales, it's one thing. It's the after sale relationship strategy that I feel is probably more important to retain clients, continue to offer them services that they require and products, as well as working through them to get access to more opportunity with their network of relationships.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I might add that even on the sales side, given that we live and work in a very regulated environment, that process is becoming increasingly important to make sure that you're ticking all the right boxes.
Absolutely.
And it's the analogy I always use. It's like an NHL team, right? They practice plays, which is the equivalent of the process that an advisor would use. And that's not meant so that the game itself becomes very mechanical and rote. That practicing the processes allows the freedom for the player, the stars, to be able to be creative and react in the moment, to have the extra resources to kind of do the things that require that special tweak or finesse, etc., because the rest of it is now down to muscle memory.
Absolutely. Well, they all have systems. All of the pro teams have systems that they're playing.
Correct.
And they will evolve the system based on what the other team's systems are. And that's where they're trying to compete and combat against their competition. When I look at advisors today, and I think, starting out, younger advisors or new advisors, I should say, because the average age of entrance to the industry, I think, is still around like late 30s, early 40s.
Right.
They are really trying to drive revenue. And I think you mentioned earlier, it's that lifestyle practice mentality kind of creeps in. Where I've seen advisors have real impact on themselves and their business is when they start to shift their thinking from revenue and sales to business. And it's one thing I've done over the years, and I didn't do this in the early stages. I learned it through the experience I had in coaching. I'd ask advisors, step out of your business. What I want you to share with me is, what's your personal vision? What do you want to achieve? Let's say in 3 years, what do you want your personal life to look like? And that often is a very difficult question, harder than what they want their business to look like, because we aren't wired to think this way. But when they take the time to start to craft a personal vision, we now can discuss, okay, what type of business do you have to build in order to achieve that personal vision? And it's amazing the buy-in, both mentally and emotionally, that advisors get when they start to realize, hey, this is all about me getting to that place with myself and my family or whomever, versus just trying to build a business that generates more revenue. Now it's a means to an end more than anything.
That's a great question and a great approach. Now, we did promise that we'll talk about AI, so let's go there. You had mentioned when we talked earlier, Ray, that we can delegate to AI, but that we can't abdicate. I love that turn of phrase. Can you unpack that idea for us? And where do you see the real opportunity with AI and advisory practices, and where might advisors need to be a bit more cautious?
Well, great questions. If I look at AI today, a lot of people will use Chat GPT the way we use Kleenex for tissue. It's a brand name that we now use
Right.
for AI. But there are a lot of systems out there, from Gemini to Claude, Grok. There's a whole bunch. But the reality is, with AI, you can't just put in a prompt, take the out, and use that verbatim. There's still an onus on us. It's just like hiring a new employee. There's an onus on us that we are responsible for that output.
Right.
So we need to be able to review and assess, take the information, because often what comes out of AI comes out very quick and very detailed, which is fantastic. It saves time there, but we do still need to review it and then figure out how we want to apply that. I use ChatGPT and Gemini quite frequently on a daily basis, but I'm using it to augment what I'm doing myself. I'm advising a couple of startups that have AI agents for different purposes for industry. They're doing some really cool stuff. With the agents, we're going to get to a point where more can be done behind the scenes to give us the output we want. But that's going to be an evolution. I think for advisors today, the example that I'll use is I did a prompt. I was trying to put some marketing stuff together, so I asked the ChatGPT to pretend it was Steve Jobs, and I gave it a context for what I was trying to do.
Right.
And I got the output, just having some fun with it. And that's the advice I give most people today. Like, don't be afraid, play around with it, and try different things to see what the outputs are. But don't just take it verbatim. That's where we have to delegate to it, but we can't just take what they give us as verbatim.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I play with ChatGPT, I play with Claude, and it's great as a tool. But your point, I might make two comments to that.
Sure.
I can never forget this story, and it's a real story about this lawyer in the US
Yes.
that did a court submission, a court filing, and he was arguing in court in front of the judge, relying on ChatGPT research. And the
Yes.
judge just ripped him to shreds because the cases that he cited did not exist. Right.
Yes, exactly.
So, full hallucination. So to your point, it's very important to double check what you're getting out of these ChatGPT or Claude.
Absolutely.
The other thing I would say, especially for us as in a regulated, privacy-driven industry, I think we have to be careful, and advisors in particular need to be careful about putting any client-sensitive information into a chat box, et cetera, because it's not entirely clear that that information doesn't then become part of the overall language model that is being used.
Exactly. And when you say that, on the surface, we think, well, that's just logical. Why would anyone do that? But when we're just in the moment and we're running hard, sometimes we don't think. And we do have to put some guardrails around ourselves to
Right.
ensure we don't put someone's real name in or
Right.
identifying fields of information, because you're right, we don't know where that's going. And I was at a conference, ITC Vegas, last year, and the overarching theme was all about AI and everything else. But really, it was about how do we regulate and police this in a way that allows us to really leverage the tool, but not open up the industry to much more and more risk. There's too many bad players out there already, and we don't want to give them more ammunition to come after. So when I say bad players, I don't mean regulators, I mean the criminals that are out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's good advice, and it's still early days, but we're all subject to spam calls, and we see all of the fraud that's occurring even without AI. I think this is just something that we need to be aware of and be taking proper precautions. I think your point is right. It seems obvious, but all of us will have to stop to think: is there identifying information that I'm putting in there? Right? I mean,
Yep.
The natural reaction is, of course not. I'm not really putting the specific details, etc. But it always struck me that somebody said, "What is it? That if you put your name and I think there's three pieces of information that a scammer needs to kind of get your full history, right?"
Oh, yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. So,
Depending on where you're based, Canada, it's a little tougher, but not a lot tougher than the U.S. But they don't need much information. One of the things I'm concerned about is the ability to capture someone's voice.
yeah,
You need 5 seconds, and then they can take that and basically make you say anything.
right.
So if you have clients or family, there could be phone calls happening that sounds like you, and the fraud risk there is significant.
100%. Now, we touched on succession, and it's one of those problems that the industry's talked about for decades. Yet here we are, and most firms are still not prepared. What, in your view, is getting in the way of effective succession planning? And is there a role for technology to help unlock that next generation of advisors?
Yeah, what's getting in the way? This has been I'd say a focus of mine probably since 2004. So over 20 years now. And the industry, when the numbers are thrown around, the average age was when I look back then, it was 51. I think people are saying it's 58, 59 now. A lot of people are staying in the business because it is a great industry,
Right.
and you continue to service and support your clients and help new people as you choose. On the wealth side, I think they're in a place where they're getting better at the succession side of things, in that they're helping advisors transition their books to other advisors within wealth firms. They're helping with financing, things like that. They're doing things where there's more of a runway of the, I won't say retiring advisor, but the downsizing advisor still stays involved for a few years, which actually benefits everybody, including the clients. But I think overall, a lot of advisors aren't sure how to approach succession.
Right.
They've tried bringing on junior advisors. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it hasn't worked out the way they wanted it to, because the juniors either came on and the focus was for that junior to build a business within the business. And as they got successful, then they exited out and did their own thing. And the opportunity I see is for those senior advisors to bring on juniors to help build that business and to incorporate them into the systems and processes of the business and take on more and more responsibility to become that natural successor. But I think that the challenge is really, it's more about the how than it is about the why and when. And the more that the industry as a whole can support the how, and that can be from a process perspective, from a financing perspective, I think that's going to help things. The other thing is advisors have to recognize, and I think compliance and regulatory changes will continue to put pressure on this. They have to recognize that they can't just do this business part-time. As they get older, yeah, it's great you've got a block of business and you can be reactive to your clients' needs, but you really do have to proactively service them. Now, technology can be a leverage point for that, helping with the proactive outreach and the reminders on who to connect with and when. I also think technology is a key for transitioning a business, because I do a lot of work with insurance advisors, and often I'll ask them, what's your system? What do your systems look like? Well, they've still got the old filing cabinets with paper-based to a certain extent.
Right.
And I'm going, oh my God, like, you'll be lucky if someone doesn't charge you to take over your business
Right.
because of the risks that are there. So I think technology, getting a solid CRM in place with clear processes, really will help increase the value and the transferability of practices in the market.
That's some very powerful observations. One that really struck me, what you said, Ray, is that you can't do this part time. And that's bang on, especially in a regulatory and a fast moving world. I think that's something that advisors need to keep in mind. Now, you had mentioned something about the perhaps the more effective way that senior advisors can bring junior advisors is, and I'm putting words in your mouth, is in effect teaming. Right? That they're
Yeah.
not brought in to build their own business within a business. They're teaming up on the existing kind of clients and then growing it from there. I totally agree with your point that it's the how that matters more than the when and the where. What can you think, what would be some recommendations or suggestions that you have for advisors that are interested in this and agree with this concept, that they can start thinking about the how?
Yeah, for sure. I think where it starts is they first need to get clear on what they want their role to be. Because often when I speak with advisors, they're wearing a lot of different hats.
Right.
They just are, I have to react to this. I'm doing this today. I'm going to be working with our accounting and doing that. I'm going to be doing my outbound marketing call, whatever it is. They wear a lot of hats. And whatever stage an advisor's at, getting clear on what their role is. And what I mean by that is, what are they accountable and responsible for? What are the outcomes that they're directly responsible for? And if they have to wear a couple of hats, I won't argue that, but it has to be a conscious choice that that's what they want their role to be.
Right.
Once they've got that clarity, then they can assess what else is in the business that needs to get handled, and they can decide what they want to outsource and what they want to hire for. And I always say you want to hire for core competencies.
Mm-hmm.
So if my focus as I built my practice, let's say I've been in business 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is, I've built up a good client base, I've got pretty good revenue. Where do I get my joy? Where do I have the most fun in my business? I want to do that more of the time than the stuff I have to get involved in.
Right.
So sometimes I'll look to bring on some, whether it's an accounting or a bookkeeping firm to handle all of that stuff. Maybe I've got a marketing firm that I can bring in to help me with my social media strategy, whatever that is. But now I can start to look at, okay, who are the clients that I want to work with? Who are the ones I want to replicate? And how am I going to go out and get them? Well, I still have all these other clients. So now if I'm going to bring in an associate, I need to be clear on what their role is going to be, what they're accountable for and responsible for, and how we measure success for them. It's been interesting over the years. I've had advisors that have been reticent to bring on other people because in the end, they realize it creates accountability on them. They have to do what they're supposed to do.
Right.
When they're kind of lone wolves and maybe have an admin or two, they can kind of get away with doing whatever they want. But now when you're bringing on other people in similar roles, there's a different level of accountability. And I think that's a positive thing. And I think it actually adds to the value of the business. So hopefully that gives us a bit of context to the question that you asked.
No, it is. It does. I think it's a very important one. You got to start at the beginning to kind of define what it is that you bring and what it is that you don't want to do anymore and see how you can fill that gap.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, what is valuable that you just said is that you need to have a real business that you're going to be able to sell. And so that means that there's processes and people that can run and do the things that clients are going to expect to be done with or without you there. Right?
Yep, exactly. Now, to flip that, I will also support somebody who says, I want to build a lifestyle business. I want to generate a good revenue every year. I'm not as fussed about selling something down the road. If that's a conscious choice, I'll support that all day long. Unfortunately, too often when I meet with advisors, that's just been a default because it's been an unconscious decision. So that's where they need to get that clarity for kind of where they want to get to.
100%. And I agree that there's nothing wrong with this being a lifestyle practice. It's noble, and that's great. To your point, where they're not clear, then they go into it by default. Or worse, what I've seen is situations where they wanted to run it as a lifestyle practice, and at the end, towards the end, they start thinking they want to get multiples on an exit, which you can't have both, right? An exit multiple is only viable for a viable business.
Exactly. I've asked advisors in the past when I've worked with them on succession, they come up with multiples. I'm hearing people are getting 4 or 5 times, and I'm like, 4 or 5 times what? Is it based on recurring revenue? Is it on profitability? Like what is it? And often they can't articulate that. I'll often ask them the question though: if you were going to go out and buy a business today, and you looked at your own business, what would you pay for it?
Right.
And sometimes that's a bit of a sobering question for some of them.
That's a great question. That's a very good question. Now, let's go back to what we talked about a bit earlier about this, everybody rushing into the high net worth market, if you will. And you've argued convincingly that the right tech and segmentation strategy, there's a real opportunity in the mass affluent and retail markets. What does that look like, that model look like in practice?
Oh boy, that's a good question. You know, I'm a big supporter of the high net worth strategy. I'm coaching advisors that is their focus, and you know they're putting the business together to support that. And again, conscious choice, I'm always supportive of.
Right.
But on the mass scale, uh, people always say, and I can't remember what. One of the investment organizations in Canada just recently announced that they weren't going to be paying out comp on investment, or no, they were charging more for the investment accounts for
Right.
under a certain amount,
Right.
and that would really impact some advisors' practices, and there's concern around that, and I get that. I think as you look forward, how people are going to want to deal with advisors, some of them, it's okay to have a transactional relationship, and that doesn't mean it's a one and done. My dad was 40 years in the business, and his mantra was eat what you kill, move on with the hunt. It wasn't about relationships at all. But I still feel that, you know, when you're in a transactional relationship, it still is a relationship, and there still is an opportunity to be proactive in managing that relationship. But in order to do it at scale and profitably, that's where you need to leverage both your process and then technology to support that process.
Right.
So, for instance, if I'm doing a mass marketing out, you know, whether it's online, whether it's through partnerships with neighborhood associations or whatever, and I'm getting prospects coming to me for help. I can set up my website. I can have a self-directed needs analysis on there. That's simple. Gives them some initial information. Gives them the ability to request a meeting. They can schedule that. It could be a 15-minute meeting. It could be with me, or it could be with my junior advisor.
Mm-hmm.
It could be with a licensed admin person that I've got that just answers some basic questions, assesses where that person's at, and helps them through potentially the buying process for whatever it is they need. So they need to set up an investment account with a monthly PAC of, you know, $100. You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And what that becomes is potentially over time inventory for cross-selling and upselling.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you've got to have the process in place to be able to do it at scale and arguably with profit.
Makes total sense. Now, you've coached hundreds of advisors, and you've got a good grasp of where the industry is and where it's going. What's the mindset shift you think advisors most need to make today in order to stay relevant over the next 10 years?
That's a really good question. You know, I think that they cannot just sit back on what they've always done. I think that the advisors of tomorrow are going to continue their success or grow their success by embracing change.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it sounds kind of trite when I say it, but you know, things are accelerating and will continue to accelerate, and you know that's going to be driven by technology for sure, but it's also the changing mindset of the demographics
Right.
in our population. You know, my daughter just turned 30. I can tell you that she and her husband don't really want somebody coming over to the house in the evening and sitting at the kitchen table talking to them about financial planning.
Correct.
They're going to do their own research online. They will probably want to talk to somebody to get advice at the right time. So you need to have yourself set up in a way that you can provide the information that people are looking for on a self-serve basis, and then be ready to provide that advice in whatever format is most appropriate. You know, whether it's through this is face to face, and a friend of mine, Brent Lemansky, who just retired as head of Limerick Canada, he used to say this is face to face, but now what used to be face to face is skin to skin. And I said, Brent, that's a little potentially offside, but what he meant was you're actually in person meeting with people. And I think that when we look at younger advisors coming into the industry, and I'd love to see a lot more, to be honest, they're looking at how they leverage technology, how they can do what they do in financial services the way they do things in their personal lives. And a lot of it is through texting and the Instagram and TikTok interactions that they have. And then they're still getting together with their friends and family in person, but it's different than kind of when we were growing up, where everything was just, okay, you pick up the phone, hopefully somebody would answer and you'd figure out where you're going to meet. I think the industry has to stay relevant. So even if you're an older advisor my age, you still need to be up on what's happening, with the younger generations, because your clients today eventually are going to pass on, whether it's through investments or insurance, opportunity to that next generation. And if you want your business to be there to support that, you need to have people that can speak to that generation, and you need to have a way to build the relationship before they're even at that stage where they would be clients of yours potentially.
Your comments remind me of a conversation I had with a previous podcast guest who is in PR, and she had given advice to an advisor who was branding herself. Her target audience was divorced women, and it's a
Right.
big niche. But initially, I think the advisor was focused on, perhaps ads in glossy magazines, right? And there was a lot of work that was done. And this PR advisor had said that, is that where your clients are? Are they reading? Is a divorced woman going to be reading these glossy magazines? And the answer after a lot of research is no, they're not. And it comes back to your point. It's whatever channels that an advisor might have used, whatever types of information or mode of information that the advisor might have used. It's important, but it's perhaps irrelevant if your target audience or that next generation of clients, your clients' kids, aren't using that. Then you have to think about how you need to adapt your message or the way that you deliver that message to wherever those future clients are going to be.
Absolutely. Come back to the succession topic. This has a direct impact on the potential value of your business, because if I'm coming in to look at your business to potentially acquire it, one of the things I'm looking at is, what's your existing client base look like? What's the average age? What are the niches that you're in? And if I see that you've got some older clients, that's fine. But if there's a swath of the younger generation, I see opportunity there. I'm probably willing to pay more for that type of opportunity than, if everybody's the same age as the advisor, and I know that they're going to be aging out and there's no relationship with that next gen.
That's such a great point, Ray. Such a great point. I think you're absolutely right that it's that growth potential that you're really selling for a viable business. That's where you get the higher multiples.
Exactly.
So finally, Ray, for advisors listening in who want to future-proof their practice, what's one practical step they should take in the next 30 days?
Boy, in the next 30 days. Well, we're halfway through the year. And when I talk to a lot of advisors and I ask them about what their vision of success is for their business, I'll ask them kind of 1 year, 3 year, 10 years. And what ends up happening for a lot of advisors, they do their planning in December, January for the year, and they'll set their targets, and they're kind of, some of them are tracking them on as they go. Some look at it infrequently. I think halfway through the year, it's an opportune time to step back and go, okay, where am I year to date, and where do I want to be by the end of this year? And don't just come up with a financial number. That's part of it. You want to make sure that you're on track for whatever that financial target is that you want to achieve, but also start to bring in, what do you want the business to look like by the end of the year? What do you want your what do you want to experience personally before the end of the year? And as you articulate that, start to figure out, if you're not on track, how you get on track. If you are on track, you need to challenge yourself and say, okay, am I aiming high enough? Is there something I need to adjust? And then, the one thing I'll add on, kind of cheating, it's a little more than one thing, but is in that, clearly define what you want your role to be. So almost make a do not do list as opposed to a to-do list. So figure out all the stuff you don't want to do going forward, and then start to figure out how that is going to evolve over the next 6 months before the end of the year.
That's great advice. And I love the do not do list, but I also love the caution that you gave that don't just focus on the financial. That's very important. And that different timeframes, the 1, 3 year, for instance, and perhaps even 5 years. And because it goes back to your comment, if you have a strategy of growing a younger customer base, for example, that isn't a 6-month effort. That is a 3-year effort.
Mhm.
So you have to work backwards to your point to say, so if your goal is in 3 years' time that you have, and I'm making this up, 20% of your practice being the younger generation, what steps do you need to take in the next 6 months to kind of get the ball rolling so that in 3 years you can achieve that goal?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. It's it's the old adage, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, but really it is getting clarity about where you want to be in the future at a specific time. And the clearer you can create that vision, I always use the analogy, remember the Polaroid photos?
Mhm.
You take a picture and then you'd pull it out and everybody would shake it like it would develop faster. But when you watch those develop, it never just appeared as a full picture. There were parts that would start to
Oh,
come
that's
into
great. Yeah,
focus.
that's great. Yeah.
And when you think about your vision, the clearer that vision can be so that you see that full picture, so that you can carry that around with you and it starts to influences your decisions, things you're going to do and not do. That becomes powerful. And it doesn't have to be something you build into your marketing or anything else, but it can be something you share with the people that are important to you, whether that's your spouse or family. It could be something you definitely share with the people that work with and for you,
Mhm.
because the more they understand this is where we're going, the more they can buy in and support that.
That's great. I love that Polaroid analogy. I had never thought of it that way. Ray, we're coming to the end of our podcast. So
Mhm.
I'll have a few rapid fire questions for you that I ask all my guests. So, number one, professionally, what is the most important lesson you've learned over the years?
Build strong relationships and do it planfully. If it happens opportunistically, great. But work at building strong relationships because it's something that has really served me well over the years. I can't say enough about the power of the relationships in your life and in your work.
That's great advice, especially in a relationship business. You're right. I think we tend to underestimate, especially perhaps newer advisors that are coming in. It's a long-term game, and you'll be surprised how many people you come across over and over again as as you
It is a
mature in the business.
small industry and you don't want to burn bridges.
Correct. So, number two, what is one practical tip you would offer listeners keen on applying your insights?
You know what? It really, I think it comes down to making time to work on your business, not just in your business. And what I've done with people I've coached in the past is they've actually set up meetings in their calendar with their business.
Hmm.
And they take that time that they block off and they'll decide if it's, afternoon, a month, an hour a week, a day a quarter. That's up to each person to decide. But when you take that time, you treat it as if you're meeting with your top client. It is sacrosanct. You are not going to reschedule it. You're not going to, say, oh, I'm going to do some other stuff while I'm thinking about this. You need to step out of working in the business and really start to work on the business. Reflect on where you've come from,
Hmm.
where you're at, and get real clarity on where you're trying to go to. And when you have that, it now becomes easier to say, okay, if that's where I'm trying to get to, and I can define when I want to be there, I now can create that strategy or ensure the strategy I have is moving me in the right direction.
I love that. It's important, and beyond the work on your business rather than just in your business, the tactical element that you propose is very powerful. That you actually block it in your calendar
Yeah.
and work everything around it because it is important. Whether you do this once a quarter or twice a year, for a couple of hours or an afternoon or a day is irrelevant. It's
Yeah.
this idea that you do kind of dedicate this time to reflection and undisturbed thinking about all of these key questions that you've outlined.
Absolutely. Too often, our life is elastic and the things like our family and planning and all of that kind of gets pushed to not to the side, but it's the priority shifts because opportunity presents
Right.
itself or the stuff has to get done. So it really is inherent on us to really make the commitment that we are going to do this, and it will be something that's approached just like any key meeting that we've committed to.
That's great. Ray, this has been a fun and rich exchange of ideas. If listeners want to learn more about you or connect with your work, where should they go?
I think the easiest is just find me on LinkedIn, Ray Adamson, and feel free to send me a connection request. I'm always happy to jump on quick calls to have conversations. I'm helping a lot of startups who are targeting financial services, a lot of them in the tech space. I enjoy having those conversations and trying to help people based on the experiences that I've had over the years. So feel free to reach out anytime on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to connect.
That's great. Ray, thank you again for joining us today on the Future Ready Advisor.
Thanks so much, Sam, for having me. I've really enjoyed this and look forward to talking to you soon.
Likewise. In this episode of the Future Ready Advisor, I spoke with Ray Adamson, a longtime coach, practice management expert, and FinTech executive, about building scalable, human-centered advisory practices in an evolving industry. Here are my 3 key takeaways. Number 1, from unconscious competence to systematic excellence. Ray highlighted that many successful advisors are unconsciously competent. They're good at what they do, but they can't articulate their processes. This becomes a critical limitation when trying to scale, delegate, or even eventually selling the practice. The path forward requires mapping out your actual processes in analog form first, then digitizing strategically. Like an NHL team practicing plays, the structure creates freedom for creativity and ensures consistency in client experience, especially in our highly regulated environment. Number 2, delegate to AI, but don't abdicate. Ray's insight about artificial intelligence perfectly captures the current moment. We can use AI to augment our capabilities, but we remain responsible for the output. Whether it's ChatGPT helping with marketing copy or more sophisticated AI agents handling routine tasks, advisors must treat AI like hiring a new employee. Review everything, maintain accountability, and never input client-sensitive information. The opportunity is enormous for efficiency gains, but the guardrails are essential. Number 3, the mass market opportunity requires strategic thinking. While everyone rushes towards high net worth clients, Ray sees untapped potential in serving the mass affluent and retail markets, but only with the right systems and technology. This isn't about doing more of the same work for less money. It's about designing scalable processes that can profitably serve a broader population that genuinely needs financial advice. The key is building transactional relationships that still prioritize proactive service and long-term value creation. Ray reminds us that the future belongs to advisors who embrace systematic thinking over ad hoc habits, those who work on their business and not just in it. You've been listening to the Future Ready Advisor. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify, or share your feedback wherever you listen. Be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. For more insights on how to keep your practice future ready, visit www.samsivarajan.com. You can find the link on the show notes. There you'll find free tools and resources, along with exclusive bonus content from these podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more strategies with you in the next episode.